Okay, so there's something pretty interesting that seems to be happening with France. Now, what we can see here is that there has been a Franco like Anglo kind of breakup. Obviously, I covered the story about how they felt backstabbed by Australia and the United States and the UK and everyone, especially the United States though, because obviously they're supposed to be allies and supposed to be close with the EU, especially with Joe Biden, but Australia ends up taking the nuclear submarine deal with the UK and the US instead of going with the diesel powered ones that France had to deal with them for. And so they're looking for everyone's looking for influence in that like oceanic region right now. Asia and the oceanic region with China. So that was a big deal, and what we can see is there seems to be a bit of a split going on here. And so it says Macron floats EU security pact with Russia, risking Western split over Ukraine. Now, one thing I want to say is, trying to learn some French. Macron, I think it's supposed to be like Macron. I like that is really difficult to say. Otherwise, I would say it that way if it were easier to say, but it's way too difficult. So it says French President Emmanuel Macron called on the EU to forge its own plan for security and stability with Russia in a move that risks undermining Western solidarity in the face of Kremlin aggression towards Ukraine. In a speech to the European Parliament, Macron called for EU states to conduct their own dialogue with Russia rather than support ongoing diplomatic efforts led by the US and NATO, and in sharp contrast to a plea from US Secretary of State Antony Blinken for unity. Macron said that despite the joint EU-US diplomacy, Europeans had to offer Russia a solution to de-escalate tensions with Moscow in the coming weeks. We should build as Europeans working with other Europeans and with NATO, and then propose it for negotiation with Russia, he told MEPs in Strasbourg on Wednesday. It is good the Europeans and the United States coordinate, but it is necessary that Europeans conduct their own dialogue. Macron's intervention is the first example of public dissent between NATO members since the U.S. first warned of a potential Russian attack on Ukraine more than 2 months ago. It also breaks a united front between the EU and U.S. on Russia, forged by what officials have described as unprecedented levels of diplomatic outreach by the U.S. to engage Brussels in the ongoing dialogue with Moscow. And so obviously there's this Ukraine buildup. Vladimir Putin is trying to distract from the fact that his country is crumbling in the face of coronavirus. They just had the largest peacetime population decline ever in all of its history. People are dying in mass swaths from coronavirus. Obviously, Russia's economy is entirely oil-based and all that stuff, and so it's really missing out on a lot. Outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg, people don't really have any money in Russia. And so there's all these issues going on, and he's trying to divert from that by doing this. He does the same shit every time. He did that in 2014, and I think even like the Syria stuff was also a kind of look away strategy. I mean, it's literally politics 101. If you're trying to regain domestic support, you engage foreign. That's literally what you do. We've seen, even Bill Clinton did it. I think he bombed somewhere. Like he bombed somewhere during his impeachment trials, and we see all this kind of stuff. It's politics 101. So that's what's going on here. But what's interesting is seeing this kind of split. Now, this article says that that Russia has tried to split the EU and the United States, and so whether or not this would be something that would like benefit Russia is questionable. But what I have to say is on that front, does this benefit Russia? Because right now Russia, essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep their area, they think that they have the sphere of influence going on with like Kazakhstan and those countries, like former Soviet states, trying to keep their sphere of influence, like 100 years in the past, as if it's like still the 60s. Like it's not the 60s anymore. We're in 2022 now, and so countries that are around you that are now revolting against Lukashenko and the dude in Kazakhstan, it's just like, it's the new guard. You have to respect what people's democratic will is, and eventually Putin's going to have to come down in Russia. but there does seem to be in countries in Europe, like, Angela Merkel was there for like 16 years, something ridiculous like that, which is stupid. But Putin's been there forever, and I know he flip flopped from prime minister or president. He was in control the entire time. And I think Russia has a lot more to benefit. And I think if travel between Russia and the United States opened up and it was more liberal, I think that would like kind of cool more of the tensions. Because honestly, like I don't really think it's like that crazy of a difference or something like that, where it's like two countries are at war with each other. But that sphere of influence, a lot of those countries don't want to be like Russia. They want to be more westernized. They want capitalism. They want more freedoms. And Russia is trying to prevent that, not only within its own country, but like we saw with Kazakhstan recently. And so, that's kind of what they're doing. So obviously there's the Ukraine stuff going on. Now, in terms of Macron doing this with, France, I don't know if he seems to be trying to put France more on the map of being more powerful, more of like a power country. Like France it's a real, it's a serious country, certainly. Does it crack like the top five? You got like the US, you got China, Russia. I would say Russia's probably more powerful, but it's hard to tell because, is it going based off of economy and political economy and blah, blah. It's hard to do rankings like that. But, they're definitely top 10, so they're definitely powerful. But it seems like, is Macron trying to make himself like a, de Gaulle figure? I don't know if you guys know, like Charles de Gaulle. He was the president in like the 60s, and he's probably the biggest political figure in recent French memory, I would say. I think a lot of politicians are still trying to mold themselves after him even now. So, he was a guy who was a big name in trying to bring France back. But one thing that is beneficial of France being this kind of wild card is, you have to question whether or not like a hegemony of the EU and, United States being together. So at the hip, like, for example, during the Iraq War and the lead up to the Iraq War, France was like the only country that was really, really against the invasion of Iraq. Tony Blair and, the UK were just, lapdogs for the United States. And so it's good to have that kind of check, because not everything that the EU or the United States does is going to be good. So I'm in favor of it in that form, because it is important to be like, okay, you have at least some kind of a check on yourself. You don't want to just be completely in unison on literally everything. Whether or not this benefits Russia, I'm not really sure, but it's definitely good to have that kind of a check. I know that the U.S. opinion of French people actually went down quite significantly after they were against it. I mean, France was more against the Iraq War than Russia was. If anything, Russia kind of seemed to take more of an abstention point of view in the run-up to the Iraq War, whereas France was like, fuck no, we do not support this shit. So that was nice, right? They were right on that, and so it's important to have that kind of a check. So I support it. I support the EU having more independence. I think it can only be a good thing to kind of at least be a check on each other. And I think that, the United States can make a lot of dumb decisions too. And so it would be nice if like the United States wants to invade another country, if the EU is like, nah, we don't fuck with that. Or they're trying to pull out of the Iran deal and they're like, yeah, we don't fuck with that. Like that's nice. Like that's a good thing to have. So I support it. But I think you only can run for 2 terms for 10 years in France. So I don't think he can really make himself like that kind of, de Gaulle kind of figure. But, nonetheless, definitely an interesting story to see. You see this Anglo-Franco split going on right now. And, I think it can be a good thing. Whether or not this is going to help Russia in terms of splitting them up, I'm not particularly sure. But definitely let me know your thoughts down below.